Diese Extremisten.
Kriegstreiber.
Verbrecher.
Als ein Diktator.
Der Schurken auch Feinde der Menschenrechte.
We go now to Russia's Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov. Good morning, Minister Lavrov. I want to ask you about what happened in Kyiv. There was a large Russian attack on that capital city about 1 o'clock in the morning. President Trump has said publicly the Russian strikes are not necessary and very bad timing. Vladimir, stop, was his quote. What made it worth killing civilians when Ukraine says it's ready for a ceasefire?
We only target military goals or civilian sites used by the military. President Putin expressed this for so many times, and this is not different this time as well. We never consciously target civilian sites, unlike the Selenskij regime.
So was this an intentional attack then, not a mistake?
If this was a target used by the Ukrainian military, the Ministry of Defense, the commanders in the field have the right to attack them.
So just to be clear, when the President of the United States says, Vladimir, stop, is this a rejection of that request? Was the assessment that because of what you say regarding the concerns that this loss of civilian life made it worth it?
Well, I can assure you that the target attacked was not something absolutely civilian like a TV center in Belgrade in 1999. This was an intentional attack against civilian target. In our case, we only target those sites which are used by the military. And regarding the ceasefire and regarding the call to stop, President Putin immediately supported President Trump's proposal a few weeks ago to establish a 30-day ceasefire, provided we do not repeat mistakes of the last 10 years, when deals were signed and then Ukraine would violate those deals with the support and with encouragement from Biden administration and from European countries. This was the fate of the deal of February 2014. Then this was the fate of the Minsk agreements. And this was the fate of the deal reached on the basis of Ukrainian proposals in Istanbul in April 2022. So President Putin said, ceasefire, yes, but we want the guarantees that the ceasefire would not be used again to beef up Ukrainian military, and that the supplies of arms should stop.
Ukraine accepted on March 11th that idea of a U.S. brokered ceasefire without preconditions. You're saying the preconditions are a negotiation to end something else?
No, it is not a precondition. It is the lessons learned after at least 3 times. The deals similar to the one which we are discussing now were broken by the Ukrainian regime with the strong support from European capitals and Biden administration. If you want a ceasefire just to continue supply arms to Ukraine, so what is your purpose? Right. You know what Kaja Kallas and what's his name, Mark Rutte said about the ceasefire
and the Secretary General
settlement.
And the European Union.
They bluntly stated that they can support only the deal which at the end of the day will make Ukraine stronger, would make Ukraine a victor. So if this is the purpose of the ceasefire, I don't think this is what President Trump wants. This is what Europeans, together with Selenskij, want to make out of President Trump's initiative.
Will Russia continue targeting Kyiv despite President Trump saying, Vladimir, stop?
You're not listening to me. We will continue to target the sites used by the military of Ukraine, by some mercenaries from foreign countries, and by instructors whom the Europeans officially sent to help target Russian civilian sites. If you take a look at the situation in the Kursk region of Russia, for example, there is no single military target for the last 6 months which the Ukrainians would fire at. And there was also a proposal by President Trump, immediately supported by President Putin, to have a 1 month moratorium on the attacks on energy infrastructure. We never violated this commitment of President Putin, and Ukrainians violated what Selenskij seemed to support several hundred times. And I sent to Marco Rubio and to the United Nations the list of those attacks. It's really very, very telling and eloquent.
And Ukraine disputes that, but putting that aside, I want to ask you about what President Trump said on Wednesday. The President of the United States says he thinks the U.S. and Russia have a deal. Let's get it done. Does President Putin agree?
Well, the President of the United States believes, and I think rightly so, that we are moving in the right direction. The statement by the President mentions a deal, and we are ready to reach a deal, but there are still some specific points, elements of this deal which need to be fine-tuned, and we are busy with this exact process. And the President of the United States did not spell out the elements of the deal, so it is not appropriate for me to do this.
But he did say there was a deal and that he was sending his envoy, Steve Witkoff, to meet with Vladimir Putin Friday in Russia. Is that meeting still happening, and should we expect a deal this week?
Well, you don't trust the word of the President of the United States?
I was asking your president's word. What will he tell the U.S. envoy?
We continue our contacts with the American side on the situation in Ukraine. There are several signs that we are moving in the right direction. First of all, because President Trump is probably the only leader on earth who recognized the need to address the root causes of this situation. When he said that it was a huge mistake to pull Ukraine into NATO, and this was a mistake by Biden administration, and he wants to rectify this. And Marco Rubio expressed yesterday, I think, also the assessment that the American team now is getting a better understanding of the Russian position and of the root causes of this situation. One of these root causes, apart from NATO and creation of direct military threats to Russia just on our borders, another one is the rights of the national minorities in Ukraine. Everything Russian, media, education, culture, anything was prohibited by law in Ukraine. And to get out of this crisis, you cannot just forget about human rights. Whenever we discuss Iran, Venezuela, North Korea, anything, American negotiators put on top human rights. They have claims in this regard to China, to us, to anybody. But whenever Europeans and other Western nations speak about Ukraine, nobody can mumble the words human rights. Just nobody. On the contrary, what Ursula von der Leyen and other people in Brussels and in Europe say, that Ukraine is defending the European values. So one of these values is canceling the Russian language. Imagine if Israel canceled. Imagine if Israel canceled Arabic language in Palestine. Just imagine.
Yeah. You mentioned that the U.S. and Russia need to work on some of these fine points of a deal.
Yeah, you want the fine points to be spelled out?
Well, of course, I'd love that, but my question
this is not the way we...
European sources say that the U.S. proposal is really just kind of a list of bullet points. Does Russia have details, the details you need at this point, in terms of a formal proposal?
We are really polite people, and unlike some others, we never discuss in public what is being discussed in negotiations. Otherwise, negotiations are not serious. to ask for somebody's opinion regarding the substance, go to Selenskij. He is happy to talk to anybody through media, even to President Trump. He presents his claims. We
well, he said he
are
hasn't
serious.
received a
We are
formal
serious
proposal,
people,
so I was
and
wondering if you had.
we consider serious proposals. We make serious proposals, and this is a process which is not supposed to be public until the end of it.
Okay, so no deal is imminent.
I didn't say this. Now I understand, by the way, why you wanted to get brief answers to your questions. You want some slogans to be in the
No, the
broadcast.
President of the United States said there was a deal with Russia, so I wanted to ask Russia if there is a deal with the United States.
Well,
so I just want to be clear.
We made our comments on this statement. The negotiations continue, and until the end of the negotiations, we cannot disclose what it is about.
I ask about the threat of sanctions or secondary tariffs, because you recently said in an interview, if you had to personally pick sides, you would keep the existing sanctions in place on Russia. You said you've restructured the economy to be self-sufficient, and there is a growing fear that, quote, cunning Americans will lift sanctions all of a sudden to flood our market with services and technologies. So if that's the case, why should the United States consider lifting sanctions at all?
Why do you ask me? You just quoted my statement, and this statement is clear for me and clear to all those who read it. If you have questions to the American side, how they treat the situation, it is not the right address to raise it with me.
So you want to keep sanctions in place? Is that really the Russian position?
I don't want to re-explain what I explained, I think, in quite clear manner. And you quoted, I think, very close to the
I quoted you.
To the real content, yeah.
Right.
But it was a bit longer than normally you prefer. I know.
Well, what areas has the U.S. offered to lift sanctions on? Because it wouldn't be possible for many American companies to enter the Russian market right now under the existing sanctions.
It is up to them to decide.
So no offer has been made?
No. How can we offer something in a situation
The United States to Russia.
Well, the United States clearly tells us that they are interested in doing business together. We never reject business proposals provided they are based on the equal opportunities and the treatment of each other and lead to a balance of interest. Specific proposals which are being mentioned in the media, I cannot comment upon. This is not serious. We are not we are not acting like the people in Kyiv who talk to the world through the media, including talking to presidents of great countries.
So if I understand you correctly, you neither fear sanctions nor want them lifted.
Look, you quoted my statement, and
yes.
You quoted it right. That's my position.
Okay. So when President Trump threatens new sanctions, that's not of concern.
You're asking this for the third time.
Yes.
This was a brief answer. This was a brief answer, by the way.
You are being brief and direct on that part. I was asking on the sanctions for clarity and directness.
Liebe Zuschauer, wenn euch unsere Beiträge gefallen, teilt sie unbedingt in den sozialen Medien. Abonniert unseren Kanal und drückt auf die Glocke, damit ihr keine Veröffentlichung von Gegenpol verpasst.
Diese Extremisten,
Kriegstreiber, Verbrecher,
ein Diktator,
der Schurken, auch Feinde der Menschenrechte.